You're live.
It's 6:03 p.m., so we're gonna call the meeting to order. And we're gonna have some flexibility in the agenda due to having 2 out of 3. So we're gonna skip to basically to the PowerPoint, the candidate promotional evaluation metrics, and really discuss more in depth. Right, so before we begin, we're always gonna start with our why. And basically, it's beneficial to all stakeholders, from officers to ensure that every officer has equal and a fair opportunity to apply for advancement, which ultimately allows them to receive recognition as well as incentives for excellence, which promotes like continuous improvement for growth, right? So this is why officers should be kind of in favor of a structured promotional procedure, right? When we think about institutional for the organization and the benefit that a process will be for them, and that really enhances the morale and trust of officers, and it leads to improved organizational effectiveness, right? So that reduces conflict, grievance, and perceptions of unfair treatment within a department, which leads to improved teamwork, cooperation, and trust among the personnel. Training absorption, so it encourages police officers to pay attention to various trainings because the material might be on a promotional exam, right? And your inattentiveness might cost you a promotional opportunity, right? As well as officer retention. When officers believe that promotions are based on merit and performance rather than favoritism and bias, they are more likely to feel valued, motivated, and committed to the careers and ultimately to the organization, which increases job satisfaction as well as lower turnover rates, right? So when we think about more on the macro level, it ensures compliance with the consent decree requirements, as well as employing evidence-based practices, which are crucial to selecting the most qualified candidate, which mitigates risks such as lawsuits and settlements, right? And ultimately lives, right? So this is basically the argument for every stakeholder to be involved, engaged, as well as I believe in win-wins, right? For every stakeholder, right? Any comments?
Are you gonna do a public comment period at some point?
At the end. So our analysts of parliamentary documents, so in order for us to do the commander process, we have to understand the language, which is interviewing and recommending candidates for police commander, as well as the inspector general, right? And when we create our rubric for the resume as well as interviewing questionnaire, these are things that we want to take in consideration, such as community and problem-oriented police strategies, discipline, use of force, as well as problem solving, as well as interpersonal skills. And I'm going to highlight Jason because he did provide an additional criteria in the charter that I was not aware of, which is 116. So I actually allow him the time to shine. And do you want to speak a little bit more into that? Thank you.
Sorry. That's what I was looking for over there. So 116, I think we talked about this at the last introductory meeting of this, and it was passed out to 116 is entitled Police Force Controlled by Chief, and it talks about commanders, and it starts with the chief of police, the deputy chiefs of police, and the commanders of police shall be appointed by the mayor from the division of police, or they may be persons appointed from outside the division of police, outside the division, who shall have had training and experience in law enforcement, and they shall serve at the pleasure of the mayor. So that's the important sentence in there. We are in a tradition of promoting internally, but that's not what the charter says. The charter says that these commander positions can be posted and competitive and include outside people from the division that have experience in law enforcement, experience undefined. So it really broadens the horizon if we wanted to explore that issue. in setting for future command appointments, or even for this one you're considering now. You do have the chartered ability to look outside the division for candidates.
Thank you for that. As well as just my personal opinion, I think we should make it a practice to review the police union contracts to ensure when we're doing accountability, when we're doing policy, that we are making sure we're not out of compliance with that too, when applicable, right? So I thank you for Martin for doing that as well, just like the CPD, the city should be aware of the charter mandates and the consent decree, right? I think that's a reciprocal relationship, and that helps to ensure that we're informed on that aspect as well. Okay, so, so just a brief overview of the draft of the materials include the resume rubric, which basically these are tentative evaluation themes, education and training, basically to ensure that, whatever credentials that they need, if they're doing Cleveland Police leadership training, that's something to consider as well. And basically the location of the information that we can find it. Professional skills and competencies. Basically, this is where we can find in the resume, cover letter, and performance evaluations, which I know that we haven't received yet, from my understanding. So that's something that we need to highlight as well. Community engagement and problem-oriented policing strategies, finding off the performance evaluation, writing style, and communication. And then one thing to highlight, the importance of the job performance evaluation. Basically, when I reviewed it, it provides just general information about like absences, assignments, performance areas, which includes community policing, de-escalation, use of force, crisis management, and reporting. Interpersonal skills, which includes communication, decision-making, use of able, fair, and impartial policing. Workplace professionalism, which is team and cooperation, initiative, leadership, and professionalism, time and resource management, right? Two other categories include corrective actions and basically condemnations, which is civilians, like if they had anything to say, awards and agencies, right? And the narrative, and it discusses growth and achievement, areas for improvement, and guidance for career development. So I don't know about that, but overall, because we really don't know the individuals, this will help provide a comprehensive overview, right? To ensure that we are able to meet the, basically the mandates set out in the consent decree. And this is just a draft. So we got a few documents here. We have a draft, so something to look over, and we can be open to any comments or feedback from commissioners if they may have anything, or staff.
Sorry, I know this wasn't, but I did have a question.
Mhm.
Only because it was brought to my attention today that CPD had hired officer from DC that unfortunately harmed some black elder couple. And so I'm wondering, is there a way to also look at if any of these folks had jurisdiction, discipline, incidents of misconduct in other municipalities? Is that a question or anything that's been added?
About discipline?
If any of these people have previously worked in other municipalities or jurisdictions, and if so, was there any issues of misconduct or anything? Is there a question or a way we can ask them that?
So I think that might be a good question to ask. I'm not sure if they would have the information pertaining to that as well.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying that the CPD would have the information. I'm more so like just a question for, like during the interview process, what I'm saying is like asking, like, have you ever worked for another jurisdiction? And then us doing a due diligence on the back end, figure out a way to see what was their conduct like if they worked at another district.
Okay, so I think we could put a pin on that, cause I'm not sure the answer.
No, I just meant as an interview question.
Yeah, we could put it on an interview.
Yeah, so I meant like just an interview question. So I'm not saying asking CPD for the information. I'm saying like when we interview like Commander Williams, for example, right? Like, hey, have you ever worked for another police jurisdiction or municipality? And he's like, yeah, I work for Cleveland Heights. Oh, okay. Let us on the back end, we can figure out how to get the information that we'll want from them or call or whatever, but just us understanding if any of them had prior history at another jurisdiction, and then if any of them are engaged in part-time employment, which is second order, I think it's called secondary employment. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But secondary employment, which means that they, for example, you can be a CPD officer and on the weekends you work at UCI or somewhere else, or you are a bouncer at a club. Like, I will also have a question on here about their secondary employment, if they have secondary employment.
Okay,
The reason being is because there have been instances, especially in my heyday, I remember when I was young, that you would like go on West 6 and you might have some words or a negative interaction with a bouncer. And you're thinking, because you're at West 6, that this is just a bouncer. But come to find out, a bouncer is also a member of Cleveland Police Department.
mm-hmm,
And because they're on secondary employment, sometimes there's a gray area, even for a citizen to know, how do you report that, right? So do I just go to the bar or the club and say, like, Officer Williams harassed me? Or am I, because you might not know, like you might not know in that moment that they are a member of CPD, because you just think they're a bouncer. So that's why I think a question on there around secondary employment and prior jurisdictions is important. Those are two additional questions that I wanted to add.
okay. Any comment? Any comment?
Just one more argument why we need to look at the secondary employment policy and maybe have more of a Columbus's model, which is a lot more contained and a lot more orderly than just kind of, bar owners hiring whoever they want. So just a plug for that.
Okay, I'm a fan.
Wait, I'm sorry, what did you say about Columbus? And
Their secondary employment policy. So say in Columbus, if you want to hire a cop to patrol your bar, you don't go and just hire a cop. You go to the Columbus
police
Police
department?
Department, and they will assign you someone to do it.
Yeah, and I know here
It's just
you can just hire that cop. Yeah, so that was my two additional questions for the interview process. Does
Okay.
anyone else have any thoughts about that?
So, yeah, it's open to the resume one or the interview questions. So I know Alana brings some, so I'll let that soak in.
I was wondering, is that something that we can do in sort of like a pre-screening? Could that be a pre-screening question? And then if there's it could be maybe a yes or no question. And then if it's like, sometimes when you fill out applications, like if the answer is like no, then you kind of move on to the next question. And then if there's yes, and there's like some type of follow-up that says, if yes, please provide documentation or whatever, or they can explain it. I don't know, like I think that sometimes there may be a way for us to.
So it will probably be during the interview, because the way we kind of visioned it from the last meeting was kind of that we would kind of review the candidates based off different categories here, experience, training, professional experience, and that will help to really determine. So for example, if they had a discipline, right, we wouldn't encourage them to meet for an interview. Right.
It may just end up being something that becomes a disqualifier. And they would-
But I'm not sure how we would get that information from, so far from the documents that we have received, right? Because I'm not sure if they asked, I don't remember anything about part-time employment or transfer. I don't remember asking anything about that.
It doesn't. And so,
Yeah.
yes, it would be hard to do it as a in order to do it as a pre-screening, we would have to create like a survey or application
Right. So,
and send it out to these people who have already been in the candidate pool.
so if you're concerned about that, now, for clarification, are you thinking about this in terms of just the commander positions that we're looking at, or just in general as we move forward? Because what I want to make sure happens here is that right now we have 3 commander positions.
Uh-huh.
We have District 4, we have the Bureau of Special Services, now we have District 1.
Uh-huh.
So I think I'm gonna make sure that that's not putting the cart before the horse, because right now we have like 2 things we need to accomplish. We need to move forward on these actual positions that are open,
Mhm.
but then we also need to set some type of criteria and a structure for how we move forward with future promotions, and future recommendations. So I want to make sure, I feel like maybe, I just want to make sure that we're
I'm saying
not.
both, right? Because I don't think that it is fair to the community for us to promote someone to a commander position that might have had some issues from another jurisdiction and us not doing our due diligence to ask those questions.
My response to that would be, so we have whatever discipline record, so for the community, people miss a earlier meeting. We have the disciplinary files
Only for CPD.
I understand that. We have the files that pertain to CPD, so my question will follow up, if that's your concern, then I guess my question is, if we may need some files from another jurisdiction, then where do we ask for those files? Do we ask if you work for another jurisdiction in the pre-screening? I think we need to.
I was saying during the
Hold on
interview.
1 second, please. I just want to, all I'm saying is, and I'm not saying I have a solution to it, I'm not proposing like what we do, but I'm saying at some point we have to figure out where in the process then do we request those things, or when we ask them.
Yeah, I said-
That's all I'm saying.
No, I said that. So I'm saying is when we're as an interview question, right? So the person, Commander Officer Williams, is in front of us. He has made it through our initial assessment, right? After looking at resumes and everything else. Commander Williams, Officer Williams, hey, just to ask another question, question 6, have you ever had secondary employment? And question 7, have you ever, do you have you worked for another police department? If so, right, can you describe your experience? On the back end, what I'm saying, and to understand, we don't have any authority or power over another municipality. I'm saying as just just as something that we need to be on the radar of, because a person it's like a child in a school, right? You put them in one school and they hell on wheels, the next school, they're an angel. So it's that type of pattern or those type of things that you're thinking of. And so my thing was, we asked it during the interview stage. And so we have to deliberate after the interview stage. We're not going to make our decision that day. So if 2 of those people that we have interviewed, we think we want to move forward with, and we're like, oh, but so-and-so today used to work for University Heights, then we would request or ask and it's more of a courtesy. They don't have to give us anything, but just a courtesy of what is this experience, or they're like, hey, I was at Tequila Ranch 10 years ago. Well, let's see if there's an owner from Tequila Ranch that can just provide us with some info. But it's more on an as-needed basis, and I don't think that's too hard of a lift, because it's only for those who would make it to a certain point in the interview process. So maybe that's between 3 and 6 officers, depending on who made it to the semifinal round. That's what I was looking at.
That makes sense.
So I just want to get some clarity so we can start planning. So we're talking about the rubric, but I'm not sure where this applies yet. So I think the last meeting we talked about what is our process. So to Co-Chair Adams' point, we have 2 vacancies that were rescinded and became vacancies because of our action. So we now have an obligation to give the division a recommendation in a timely manner on those 2 positions, and we have to develop a process for that. So Shelley is already started working on if we're going to do a community event with the co-chairs, and there's a proposal on the table for that. But the question is leading up to a community event, which would be a community kind of forum for whatever candidates you bring. How will you find your candidates? That hasn't been defined yet. So are you going to first, as a commission, interview everyone who applied and narrow it down to a few? Or are you going to bring them all before the community at one time and do it in that fashion? So I think those questions, I hope, can be answered today so we can start putting a timeline on this and a process on this so that the staff can help support that. Because we're about to be down an important player, so that means we really need to know what the plan is. And we have community partners that Shelley had arranged that are willing to help us with this. And they're just waiting to know when we want to do it and how we're going to do it. So that proposal's on the table as well. So I think the rubric's important, but how are we applying it? What is the process that we're going to use this rubric in?
It was my understanding from last meeting, aren't we gonna review the information that we've gotten so far and decide from them who should move on to a semifinalist, and those will be the people at the end of it, or am I wrong?
That's my understanding.
Do we
That
have
was
a
my
timeline for that yet? Should we?
Oh, when we should be.
Yeah,
completed.
so how long are you gonna take to do that? Do you have everything you need to do it?
So I think, ideally that we really review the rubric to ensure that, this is how we want to go, and then we start filling it in. That's why it's kind of blank, right? That is blank for the resumes. We review it, if there's accountability, because if there's something that's severe, that's gonna just knock them out, right?
But this
As
is
well.
the interview rubric.
Well, yeah, I sent a resume
Oh.
in an
Alright, I'll pull it
email.
up. Okay.
Yeah, in the email, I'm not sure what date, right? So there was a resume rubric on different, basically criteria. So I think basically the goal is to really identify the rubric so that we can start grading and evaluating and start narrowizing them. So we have to be on the same page for the rubric so that we can all assess,
We're
right?
also still waiting on the use of force disciplinary records.
We do not have that yet.
I
As
don't,
well as performance evaluation.
Well, and also you have to decide, are you going to only look at the candidates that the division found? Or are you gonna look at what you wanna look at? So the question becomes you're making a recommendation to the mayor, right?
Mhm.
But right now you're being told, well, these are the, 8 people or whatever that applied internally. But you have just been shown that you have the option to expand that as the commission, and maybe you do a different way and make a different recommendation. So your power isn't limited to only making a recommendation from the pool that they provided to you, right? You have, so that's a question that I would urge you to consider too, is do you decide to do it your own way and start over and solicit people from both internal and external sources and consider them? Or do you just use the pool that was given to you for this particular thing and consider that the next time around?
I would think on the basis of what Dr. Adams just mentioned, for this particular round, we only use those who are already forwarded to us. We review those. I think that would make more sense because we know that these districts need a commander. And it has been over 30 days since they've had one. So in my opinion, I would want us to, for this particular round, and we can change it moving forward, and like our policy would be like, if they gave us 8, we would try to match that with another 8 or whatever, I don't know, whatever we decide. But I would think just for this round, because these are vacancies that need to be filled. And then secondly, I would think that, like you mentioned, using his resume as a criteria, I'm okay with that. My only issue is, like you said, we're still missing performance evaluations and we're still missing use of force records. I can review resumes, but I don't feel comfortable putting anyone forward who I have not seen those records. So I think a better question is to the executive director, when do you think, or how, and I know you had mentioned before, you maybe send like a letter to the mayor, but I think that like, how can we apply more pressure to the city to give us those performance evaluations and give us those use of force records? Because until we have those, I personally do not feel comfortable, and I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel, but I'm not
So
gonna work
I
on it
think
without
we're
those.
on the same page, but I think, we don't have control of that, right? But we have control over having a rubric so that when that information is presented, we have the ability to assess, right? So I think it's in different steps. One is to have our rubrics in order so that when it's time, we're able to. So, I guess it's kind of a timeline. So one, have our rubrics, hopefully that we can review it, consider any possibilities, and then hypothetically vote on it next week. And ideally that at least we have that week to get information, and that will allow us the ability to start our formal analysis, right?
Do you wanna add, cause like this rubric is just for resumes. Do we need to add questions to this regarding use of, cause that's not gonna be in a resume. So do we need to
So-
add questions regarding use of force and performance evaluations to this rubric?
So
or
I
do we
think
need
the
to create another
name
rubric?
probably should change.
Okay,
Because like if you look at the information and where it's located, right? So education and training. So I because that's how it started as a resume rubric, but then when we analyzed it, right? Education and training, you can look on the cover letter as well as the resume, right? You can professional experience and competencies, the resume, the cover letter, as well as the performance evaluations. Because I highlighted again, the performance evaluations have different categories,
yes.
right? That came into it, that will make it very helpful in our assessment of the candidates, such
So
as
do we need to add a?
general, huh?
Do we need to add a block for that? For the performance evaluation, do we need to add a separate block that just addresses performance evaluations based on your research?
So I guess for me, you collect, so these are the documents, basically, right? That we have the ability to collect information, right? And when you make your assessment, I would definitely make notes. So for example, I don't actually have it in front of me, right? I'm saying a 3 for this candidate because of their education. I got it from their resume. It says that they have leadership training, right? They says that they perform this, right? Or on this performance evaluation, right? So we're kind of using a variety of documents to help with our
create that
assessment. Right.
But we're not creating a metric for every single document.
I wouldn't say that because, yeah.
That's what I was confused, sorry.
I just want to address the issue of additional records being needed. This came up in a leadership meeting a couple. We have requested all the information we want. I will say that just this past, we thought that we had come up with some sort of agreement with the Justice and Monitoring Team that we would have 21 days to have our records requests fulfilled. And if those record requests could not be filled within the 21 days, that we would be notified that they couldn't. Unfortunately, the city has come back to request that they have 90 days. That request was sent, or the rejection of the 21 days was sent to the DOJ, and we were CC'd on that. The Department of Justice and the Monitoring Team does not agree with the 90 days, or they've already expressed through writing that they don't think that they should get 90 days. So I say all that to say that we sort of talked about, well, what will happen if we do not get the full records? And so what we would suggest is that we move forward and we do our part with everything that we have, but when we make our recommendations, we will also note that we made these recommendations without certain records requests being filled. So if we don't get the records, the only other alternative is that we just wait. So
I would
but
say we wait and we put out
listen, let me finish. If that's what this committee wants to do, then that's the decision that will be made. But that's sort of where we are. All we can do is continue to request the records. We can continue to go to the DOJ when these things aren't filled, but that's sort of where we are. So I think this committee will have to decide what you would like to do, considering that we in the past week have been told that they want 90 days, and now it's sort of back with the DOJ and everything. So I just want to get you guys updated on that, so that you can move forward with all the information.
I'll let Alana and then I'll go.
Respectfully, I would think, if the city is not gonna give us key information that is listed in the consent decree, use of force is one of the main objectives that is listed in the consent decree. If the city is not going to hold their own police department accountable to give us the records that we need to be able to have a thorough process and make sure that we are promoting someone that actually is good for the community, then I'm sorry, that weight is not on us, that weight is on the city. Because we are saying that we're willing to put in the work, we're willing to pull together at the last minute to do a meeting. But if the city can't give us the necessary foundational things, and they are, one, out of line with 115 in the charter, and they're also out of line of that consent decree. And I think then at that point, we hold it to we hold their feet to the fire, and we involve, like you said, the monitoring team, police accountability team. But I don't think that delay in having those positions filled will not be on us. It will be on the city for their lack of actually doing what they're supposed to do and be transparent and give us those records.
So again, what I'm gonna say is, I think this committee will then have to decide what the next steps forward are. So if, what I would suggest is, because at a certain point, we are the ones that, we didn't cause this issue because we weren't involved in the beginning like we should have been. However, I think we'd have a duty to the community to update them then on like why we have not made our recommendations, why we have not interviewed. I think that it would be key for us to be transparent with the public, and also just to, make sure that, there's not a perception that we're, negligent in our duty and that we're not doing our job. So like I said, I'm not a voting member of this committee. I'm here to support the committee, but whatever you decide, the co-chairs will, whatever is decided, we need to make sure that we are articulating why we're moving the way that we're moving. So like I said, I'm going to support whatever you do. And I understand the point of wanting everything. And if there are other additional requests that, or any ways that you would like the co-chairs to move on this, we'd be willing to do that.
Okay. Yeah, so it seems like we have two different tasks going on to finalize our rubrics and to request those, ensure that we request, even if it's a second time, request those necessary documents, right? Which include the performance evaluations as well as any discipline, use of force.
Well, that's not discipline, it's just use of incidents. Because they could have acted in use of force and it not be
We did the use of force, I don't know if we asked for.
we haven't asked for a performance review. But the reason we said use of force, because that's not contingent on discipline. It's just anytime an officer has been engaged in use of force.
Okay, so.
So we'll check, I will check tomorrow to see what the status is. I'm not certain that these are part of the 90-day objection because they have an interest in this moving faster, that they will probably produce these records first. So far, they haven't delayed production of these records at all when it came to this particular request for this particular task of getting these, getting a recommendation made by you. Because they have a vested interest in seeing this happen in a timely manner. They haven't resisted with the records involved in this particular request. So we can check on those final pieces, the use of force, and the performance evaluations. I will circle back with them tomorrow. I will give this committee an update on how soon to expect them, so you can build a timeline off of that.
Okay, so can I ask, overall, there doesn't seem to be very major objections to the rubrics, so we can pass this to staff to finalize as well as your criteria and Kyle has something.
Jason, the commander's interviews recorded.
They did not provide recordings. They provided the written notes and the rubric scoring, but we did not get any audio as far as I recall. Mark, was there? Was
So
no-
they have already interviewed them?
yes, these commanders were already promoted.
Right.
And then we asked for, objected to that, saying we weren't involved in the process, so they rescinded the positions of 2 commanders.
Okay.
But the division had already gone through the process of selecting 2 commanders and formally promoting them.
I just didn't know if interviews were a part of that. Why didn't they give us the,
They gave us the score sheets for that. They gave us all the resumes. And Adriana included that in her draft. She sent out a little analysis of who scored, what candidates scored what on those.
And they also sent us the appointment calendar confirmations for those interviews,
Right.
which don't really tell us much,
Yeah.
but just.
But I don't remember, I'm just trying to think, I don't recall any audio files or videos of those.
I'm just wondering why, I don't know if maybe they don't record them, I was just wondering why they didn't give us the video file.
So I want to say, I just went back into my emails. We requested the use of force records from the last 5 years that each applicant was on the street. That request was made on 3/25. Today is 4/11, which means that we are at day 17. They have 21 days to fulfill the request. So I'm currently sending a follow-up email with Jason to not only get a status on the request that we made on 3/25, but also to add the performance evaluation. So I'll send that now, and we'll hopefully get a response within the 21 days, which is the agreement.
And we may have lost a few days of translation because it originally went to Brian Kearney, who then went on a medical leave. So I did follow up with Simon to make sure that he received that and confirmed that he did. So.
Okay, so that sounds good. We're gonna move forward.
That sounds good. We're gonna give the rubrics to staff to kind of finalize and add those points that were mentioned. Okay, so for the interview questionnaire, just to go over it, basically it will highlight position overview and qualifications for the CPC, constitutional policing and motivation. These are like the themes of the question: alignment with department goals and consent decree mandates, empowering communities through best practices and community policing, handling misconduct and excessive force allegations, right? To really get their perspectives and more insight. I'm not sure if you guys have the interview, and we kind of have some things that we're looking for, that we're looking to hit on for like the answers, right? And that will help guide our assessment.
I just want to ask a quick question. So do we want a specific time frame for performance evaluations? We requested 5 years for use of force on the street records. Do we want 5 years?
That's a good question.
I just want to make sure we get what we want.
I don't know what they have on file.
What do you think?
Maybe
I mean, they probably do yearly evaluations, so just.
So do we want like a?
maybe 2, 3.
I would say 5, if.
Just do the same thing, 5 years?
I would just do 5.
Okay, I'll
And
say
if-
so.
Because I mean, this is our first time doing it, so we can, like, after this process, we can see like, oh, maybe we shouldn't put time limit on it the next time, we know that.
Okay. Yep. And part of this is seeing what they have on file too, right? Yeah. So basically, those are interview questions, and then to highlight the police, because I think it's important to understand what they find important, and then our differences and stakeholders, right? They did operational assessment, just handling of misinformation, difficult conversations, and availability, which would make sense, right? Because they will have to cover different shifts and things like that. Any questions?
Well, that was just the one that I said add those additional 2 questions about
Mhm.
secondary to this part.
Okay.
That's my only thing, but
Okay.
from what you have, it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So a couple of comments came to my mind. The document requests and talking about if you came from another city's police force before you got this position, as we know, public document requests on disciplines files for officers takes a long time. So when we were talking about waiting to ask that question until the interview process, is that going to push back our timeline too long? I know that we were going to initially reach out to the candidates first to see who is still even interested in the position. When we do that, is there going to be extra questions we can add to that? And maybe this could be considered as one of the pre-screening questions, so we can move the document request along faster. And then talking about moving our own internal document requests along faster, if we are able to shorten the list of the candidates that we need use of force reports for or performance evaluation reports for, because those people have voluntarily dropped out of the running, is that something we want to do quickly so that we can try to move our document requests internally along faster?
I'm okay with the additional 2 questions for the interview being added to that email that we send out, like who's interested. I think it is important to get those use of force documents, and it's not that many candidates. So I would still want the use of force documents for those candidates, because I think it could help us even in future proceedings and how we move and how we develop a process. Because if a person is no longer interested and we find out they have a very long history of use of force, that I feel like that information can still help us in developing our process. So I wouldn't want to only request documents for those who are just interested. I would want to request those. I think it's only fair to get all the documents for everyone the city put forward. But when it actually comes to, hey, are you interested still? And you say you're interested, then asking those 2 questions along with that email as a pre-screen, I'm fine with that. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts.
I think this is part of, we have like an outline, and we have to see what we are able to receive, basically, right? And then we have a process, right? So I guess we have to see. I don't know if that makes sense. That's my answer. I don't know if anybody else has anything they would like to add.
What date do we anticipate making a final decision? Because then we could work backwards.
Hopefully by mid-May.
Is that why the last meeting is May 15th?
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it hard to do if we don't know? Isn't it hard to do? Like, if we don't know about the document? Because I guess the way I would see it is over the next couple weeks, and in good faith, they have given us everything we've added for these candidates. But if they say no to those 2 additional records, I would think that this event will be a good opportunity for us to tell the community why we haven't been able to select a commander. So I'm just wondering, how do we put a date out there if we don't have everything that we need to even start looking?
So maybe we can pin it and then see the response to the email, because I'm unsure what is, I'm not sure if they have this information. Well, certain information. So we just have to see, right? They might be good questions about the transfer and the history.
We're not asking those 2 questions. We're just, the city, I'm talking the 2 records requests, not the 3 sort of questions.
Yeah, it kind of goes, but go ahead, Jason.
I think you have, Co-Chair Adams raised another point. The first district needs a commander too, so you're gonna be going back to back on this. I wouldn't recommend, so that means 2 events in my mind. You wanna go to the district where these and hit the residents that where the district is. So I would say a very important thing is right now, try and pick a date that we could start promoting for this. And then to your point, Commissioner Early, work backwards to get it done by that date, because we need to promote this to the community or we will be in an empty room. The goal of this is to really get a room filled with people to meet these candidates, right? Because if you make a recommendation and the city watches a video and sees that only 5 people came to your event to support your recommendation, the chances of them taking that recommendation, if it's different, are a lot lower than if you had 200 people in that meeting who all agreed with your recommendation for commander. So that matters in the strength of your recommendation, how many people you have backing that in the room when you go through this process, and how many people felt like they were part of that. So I would really say time is important, but I don't think that May 15th is enough to do this right. I think we need to at least promote this event for 30 days as hard as we can to make sure we can get seats filled. So picking that date's important, and then making sure you have your work done before that time is even more important. But we have to coordinate that date with candidates. We have to coordinate it with community partners. So that's an essential thing, is talking about that event and when you think that can happen and working backwards from there.
And I also think that, I guess, to provide alternative perspective, when we make our recommendation, it should be off of the assessment of different criteria too, right? And basically when we're making a recommendation to the mayor, so just in my opinion, if it's 5, no shame. If it's 500, right? The goal is for them to meet, have an open process, but not necessarily sway. There might be something that they say, but it's really on the criteria or the qualifications and merit.
I would just say, again, that however this committee decides to move, I think that the statement that we made was pretty public, and that people know that we did what we did. So whatever is decided, I think there also needs to be a plan in place about how we communicate this to the community. I think that, ideally, I think we would all like to see this move forward quicker rather than slower, but it sounds like it may take a little bit longer than maybe we all would like, especially if we don't get these records in a timely fashion. So I think that what I would like to see is some sort of community engagement plan, some plans to make statements or press releases, and then it also may mean that we may need to coordinate with maybe the outreach committee. So I think that no matter what happens, if we're going to do a community event, I think that this is an opportunity that one of the other things on the agenda should be sort of what would be the public relations plan, so that we don't look like we're not fulfilling our duties. But we also need some type of plan to coordinate with the outreach committee to get that word out, but also to help organize the community event for the interviews.
Cause I know the community outreach committee is a little light. I don't mind helping and supporting in any way of creating a plan and a template for 2 templates of a press release of if we get the records, and then a template if we don't and why.
I love that.
And then I think it's okay to plan these meetings. I will say, I do think we should allow maybe a question. I don't know where we put it, because in my mind, would the interviews take place in an ideal world? Do the interviews take place before the community event or after the community event?
My thoughts is that the interview is the community event.
Okay. So have it be a public.
So we would have a community event for the interviews in District 4, because it's the District 4 commander. And then we would have an additional community event for District 1. For District 1, because District 1 just opened up. So it would make sense to have the community events in the district where the commanders are going to be serving.
So ideally, what I would ask, I know we want to keep it on the merits, but I also would ask then for an additional question. I know I'm adding questions, but I would want there to be a final question where there's a ballot or just a tally survey, whatever, where everybody who is present at that moment can tally up, right, who they would select, and that would go, if we said, we create a Likert scale of 1 through 5, and there's 25 people in a room, 5 people said, Officer Williams, I just think, but Officer Williams, then that might weigh, right, on that last question of, that last question is how does community feel? We might put that as a 3 or a 2. But if there's after this, 20 people out of the 25 or 10, that's a 4 or 5. So I think that sometimes in the city, we ask community to show up and ask their opinions, but we don't give them a real way to participate in the decision-making process. So I would want that last question to be that, it be a ranking. And so when people come in, you pick up a sheet, we have the finalists that we're interviewing that night, and they just check off, like, or they put on a ranked choice voting. Sorry, my social justice language coming out, but ranked choice voting of like, who is my first pick, my second pick, my third pick. We collect it at the end of the night. We review that in addition to how they responded to these questions. That was the only ask.
So I want to play devil's advocate. So as someone who has an appointment, who was appointed, and then rescinded, how would that play in when basically serving as a role? I play devil's advocate, and I'm gonna tell you how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna tell you how I'm gonna finesse it. I'm bringing who I want to vote for me. I'm gonna be honest. Like, so I'm
It's
not saying,
real, right? But this
I'm
is the
gonna tell you,
thing, right? If it's you and me, and we both work for a resident, you bring your people, I bring my people. That's
All right, y'all.
you said like we still are bricked. Like I get what you're saying, but I think we have to start trusting our community.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying because I think this is special because we have people that was
We're
appointed.
already appointed. I agree, but my thing is, if I think I'm better than you, whether or not you were appointed, I'm gonna bring my people too. Let's go. And I'm about to try to outperform you. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with competition. Politics is politics. Competition is competition. We have to allow the people in those communities voice. And again, there's 6 or 7 questions of us. So if you score 0 or 2 on every single question, but then the community rated you at said you were their first choice, common sense, we're professionals. Common sense will tell us like, okay, they just packed the house with their people. And we still have a full scale. So I think understanding like that's why we have to make sure the questions that we ask are so pertinent and important, because we need to be in a way of like, you might get an extra 3 or 4 brownie points, but you're not about to come out the water and you're gonna have 25 points and this person had 0. That's the way I look at it.
I think we have to be, okay. So we are appointed public servants. Part of that means making hard decisions. I think that there's a few ways that could go. It could go your way or your way. I think it is important to get the feedback of the community. I like the idea of just letting people rank and just kind of see what they think and where they fall. But in the end, it is our job as commissioners to ensure, because we're going to be making our decision with much more information than what the public, anybody can put on a show. Like we all have been places where someone is an amazing presenter. They are an amazing performer, but the performance does not match the performance, right? Like their performance to get the job doesn't match what they actually do when they get it. So I also want us to keep in mind that to Commissioner Garrett Ferguson, we definitely want to make sure we're getting the input from the community, but we also want to make sure that we are doing the job that we were entrusted with, which is to make the decision or to recommend the person that we feel is best. And that may mean sometimes that you don't do what the people might want you to do. And that's just reality of being in a particular position or being in a position of leadership, that decisions are not popular. But we're going to be making this decision with much more information than a public meeting or public interview. So that's what
No, I agree with you. That's why I said it should be the last question, right? And it doesn't even have to play. So like if all the questions after we waited, let's say the rubric is worth 30 points, that last question doesn't even have to have a point value. I'm not saying I just want
just to see what they
I just want that information. I'm not saying I agree wholeheartedly with you. It's more of just to see. It's almost like American Idol, right? You could they would tell you back in the day you could vote, right? You could vote who you wanted, but at the end of the day, Simon, Paula, and Randy was making that decision. I don't care what America said. Randy and Paula and Simon made those decisions. But it just gave, and it's like a popular vote. Like, it just showed, like, oh, okay, more people like Fantasia today. Like, it's more for us to understand where we fall in line in community. So that's why I thought it was important to add that question. Not that it has to be weighted in the actual rubric.
I really want us to think about if that's what we want to do, because you can create problems for yourself. I mean, if we are in a situation where the commission wants to move on particular candidates and the public is overwhelmingly supporting a different candidate, and we are the community police commission, then how do we explain to the community that even though we're supposed to represent you and your voice, we're gonna do something different?
I think
Then,
that's
well, I think that's a serious
that's the
thing
public
to-
record thing, right? I think that goes back to our rubric. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think it is very rare, and you can easily put out a statement, right? If a person has 1 point in every other question, right? Like, so we have 6 questions, let's say 5 points per question, that's 30 points. If this person we all looked at and we're like, they have 5 out of 30, but then there's that one public opinion question where it's like everybody unanimously wants them, yeah, we know for sure that that is probably someone who just had people show up, and then we make a statement that says that. So I think it is the strength of your rubric, and we're not going to get it. It's not going to be perfect, right? People can always finagle any system, but to not allow for us to take the buy-in of community, what is the point of having a community event? Because I'm not showing up for something that you're not going to even know my feelings at the end.
Of the community event, it's not supposed to be some sort of surface level dog and pony show. The whole point is for the community to be able to ask whatever questions they want to ask, and for them to get a better feel for the people who would like to be the commander of their district. People can vote however they want to vote. We cannot tell people, you have to vote based on this, and this.
Mhm.
They vote how they want to vote.
But that's not what I'm saying. I just say it is a question that's at the end. It doesn't even have to be weighted. Rubrics are rated. 6 questions, 5 points, 30, for example, that's 30 points.
Okay.
And that last question doesn't have to have a weight to it.
Well, also, if you wanted to do more of a sort of, what do you think about these people survey? We're not even survey, just like have people actually sort of, what do you think of these candidates? What do you think of it overall? You can gauge public sentiment without necessarily engaging in a sort of quasi plebiscite sort of arrangements. There are ways to sort of gauge sentiment that would not involve casting a vote per se. If you want to capture that sentiment, and if you're just curious what people's sentiments were about things, so those can be used sort of. So it's
Like what?
it's one way to sort of express it without sort of saying, well, we're going to have a vote, because that sounds like we're gonna pick.
Right, because when you tell
Yeah,
people
and
that,
so.
But I don't think you tell people that. I think it's the way that you describe it. I literally just gave an example of like a common TV show we all grew up with. I think everybody has heard of American Idol and can probably understand American Idol. People could pull in and text a call that probably did not have as much sway on who those judges picked. It is more so.
but in American
Allow
Idol, the
people
judges
to do
didn't pick. In the end, it was whoever the public voted for and who got the most votes. Even for the person who, like, the only time that the judges came in to do something is like they want to save somebody. But in the end, who was eliminated was based on who got the least votes. Who won in the end was based on who got the most votes. I just think, I think we have to be careful of whether you're telling people hear what they want to hear. You tell someone they're voting, like that is like you think about language and jargon. When you say you're voting for something, people think they're selecting something or choosing something. So I just think
Change
you
the
have
language.
to
It's a question.
be right.
An opinion question. An opinion poll.
Maybe the way Ryan mentioned it, that might be good. And then we never know, there might be something that we might put in a recommendation, right? That might be helpful. And especially if it's like a tie, we have 2 candidates, just random possibility, right? They're kind of neck and neck. Maybe then we'll be like, oh, okay, this is based on the comment, they've done this and done this and done this, and that might help, sway between one candidate or another.
Yeah, it
That's a
doesn't, it
possibility.
doesn't have to say voting. I'm sorry if I use that language,
So
maybe,
maybe-
but opinion poll or something
Maybe
else, but
something
something, opinion poll, and after hearing everybody, we just ask you write down your first, second choice, and we collect it at the end.
So maybe something to consider, because we're not really making any kind of vote, so it might be something, we bring back and finalize next week. So I'm gonna go, Jason, and
There's some, we can look to what other city, we're not the first city to do an open and transparent selection process for a police official. Chicago, the board actually selects their police commissioner, and they just went through that process, so we can reach out to them and see what models they used. I think the key here is your pre-screen, right? So if you're gonna talk to 6 or 7 candidates on camera in this office, right, in an interview setting, the ones you're bringing to the end level of this, you've probably already made your determination. Now it's to see how they interact with the community, right? That's what you want to witness. That's what you want to feel is when they're in this space, how do they interact? So it may be that we are taking less of a role when it gets to the community and just watching how they interact with the community and evaluating that itself, rather than doing this formal technical interview in front of the community at that stage, because these would be, in my mind, your finalists that you're bringing there, right? So you're really just giving the community a chance to interact with their finalists, and you're evaluating how they react to them, right? So you're looking at the room, you're reading the room, you're feeling the moment to make your final recommendation, right? To see how did they do in the environment that they have to perform in.
So
So that's-
that's not my understanding. That, from my understanding, we're gonna ask questions and allow the community to really hear, right? Because I think it's different for us to hear, as well as they're gonna be held accountable to the community. So, yes, so they
It's the
do
actual interview.
engage with the community, but I'm not sure if that would really allow us to measure and assess just having a conversation, just one-on-one.
Sure. So, I want to ask you, because I don't think you're done with everything you need to present. Can we, do you need time to finish and then we
So-
can kind of?
So, I'll
figure
let
out next steps
Kayla, and
after?
then we can,
Okay.
because it's not finalized, hopefully
Okay.
we can review it, bring the information, and then, but definitely next week, we really need to finalize it so we can start moving forward.
I just want to
Like,
make sure you can get.
But yeah,
everything
so we could pin it.
Prepared, and so then we can then, maybe just get everything you presented and then figure out what some next steps
Mhm.
will be for next week.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you. So, I want to actually give a public comment like later or whatever, but on this particular note, I just wanted to say that I'm glad that you guys are having this conversation. This is like, I think, thank you. Is it on? Okay. This is a crucially important conversation that I think actually really requires like a significant amount of its own effort, because it's going to come up a lot. My own personal initiation into my involvement with police reform in Cleveland was the Monitor Selection Forum last year, and I will admit that I was very confused as to what was happening, and why I was there, and what the involvement of the community had, to do with things. But anyway, so I'm glad this conversation is happening, and also like in good faith, that nobody's like, that we're all like kind of trusting each other's best intentions with this discussion. The one very specific suggestion that I had is, if you want community feedback, but you don't want it to be in a voting realm, then ask for comments. Write down your comments on a person, and you guys will collect those comments, and you'll have the comments. It's not a number, it's not something that's more official. It's kind of a in-between space, and you can reflect on that. You can, again, I think this is where the outreach committee and outreach work is so crucially important for, again, having like systems for this sort of thing. But that does require, I think, principle that this group has to agree to about exactly what you guys are going back and forth about what really is the role of the input from the community in making some of these choices in real time or something. So just the comment section is a possible kind of intermediate space with that.
Thank you. So the next,
Thank you, no. I was letting you guys do the talking, you sharing the space, sharing the air. Okay, so now it's just a basic overview, just to ensure everybody's on the same page. So basically, the way the process worked was on October 30th, 2023, a divisional notice was sent out, was disseminated throughout the department, getting cover letters and resumes for the 2 positions, BSS as well as District 4. Interested candidates applied through an online portal that basically served for the chief to review. The deadline submission was for November 10th at 4:00 p.m. They received 22 applications, 14 went, 14 interviews occurred during the week of November 20th. So we did not receive any kind of information regarding the criteria, the process of that narrowing down. So we're not familiar with that. The interview explored visions, operational assessment, availability, handling of information, and basically, among those 14 candidates selected, a majority went an evaluation by 4 assessors with scores ranging from 0 to 32. These scores were segmented into 3 categories: excellent contenders, which was 28 to 32, potential leaders, which was 23 to 27, and individuals requiring further training, which was 0 to 22. Basically, the chart represents those scores. Just reporting out, okay? And then the next was basically the final selections that were presented. Overall, as you see, there was some discrepancies in District 4. And basically, the next session is to review basic research based on just to see how general procedures go, right? But the CPC does not have authority to change a promotional process, but we can contributing to presenting research on best practices to support compliance within the consent decree. As partners, I believe, as I stated, especially in the beginning, is our collective responsibility, whether you are in the police department, monitoring team, to promote constructive change rooted in evidence-based strategies, right? Basically, from a quick review, many departments initiate their promotional procedures with a thorough job analysis, right? And it really highlights frequency of performed tasks, the necessary abilities for task execution, and knowledge essential for task performance. So basically what that comes down to is the development of promotional systems with a focus on content validity, aiming to test components with the job requirements, right? That was the most effective process. And candidates typically undergo like job knowledge tests, followed by realistic scenario simulations that really focus on those higher level tasks. It's just a quick review. Basically, the first model examined tailored exam to each position, typically was commander, sergeant, lieutenant, and those exams included scenario-based, consisted of an oral, board, and they utilize, so this one is specific because they use the application, written exam, and oral board exam with a cutoff score range, right? And then this model used something called an eligibility promotion list, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, my favorite model was the Columbus model. I did. They're right next door, right? So sometimes we can create something new. Sometimes we can look at evidence-based practices and recommend something ready-made, right? So basically, they had 2 parts. One was a written and oral, very similar process. They utilized the Z-score method. It was equal 50%, and they consider seniority, which is something unique. As well as this model, they had their input from the FOP. So there is collaboration. So if that ever arises, we know a model, right? The written part evaluates skills for police commander and really focus on job-related scenarios using behavioral rating scales. And they related to communication, decision-making, as well as leadership, interpersonal skills, judgment, and, technical knowledge, right? And a lot of it went through their civil service. It was completely independent from the police department, right? I think that's all I have from them.
Do you know why they included, FOP recommendations?
Because it was in their contract, right? And in general, you gotta get the best practice, you get buy-in from officers, right? So even in this process, it may be difficult to get input, right? If they feel like it might not be in their agreement or it may be something against them, right?
Can I just say one thing?
Mhm.
Interesting model. I do think that for the 4th District and the Bureau of Special Services position, and I'm just speaking as a person who was a part of a union as a teacher, the role of a union is to basically protect its union members. And I would think that this may be a model that we could consider maybe in future promotions. But I think for this one in particular, because these commanders have already been, they were appointed and then they were placed into interim, as a union, they are going to defend the people that were already appointed, right?
Mhm.
Because their job as a union is unions don't take anything away from their members. So all I'm saying is I think that this may be a great model, but I'm not really sure if we should be inclusive of the FOP for the 2 that were already
Yeah,
appointed,
so-
because they are not
Yeah, so I
going
guess
to be on board with any other bar.
I wanna
person
point-
recommended.
a clarification. Yeah, this is not for just in general for the PSS and the 4 commanders, but here are evidence-based practices, and ultimately when we make our recommendations, we're gonna provide evidence-based practices too. And that will help. So we have to do now as well in the future too, right? And if there is any disagreement, there are models where they're FOP approved. So that may be, hypothetically, that may be any kind of change that there's resistance. You're definitely anticipating that, right? However, if we have models that was pre-approved, that has, police union support, that's like a counter, right? Because in some instance, it is, you want to ensure your officers are qualified, to ensure that they're the right fit. Because ultimately, it helps everyone. So that's why we kind of reviewed that in the beginning of it's all stakeholders, right? That includes the union too, right? Because they have grievances, even with internal processes of selection, right? If it's fair, if it's judicial, that's gonna help them too, right?
Point of clarification, because I'm kind of new to the union thing. I always felt like leadership wasn't a part of the union. So I guess at what level in a police force, are you still a part of the union versus when you're not? So commanders are still a part of the union? Like at what, I know like chief is not in the
So I
union,
think
right?
there are 2 different ones, but I'll
There's
have
2 unions.
two different ones.
There's
There's 2 different ones.
what's our clearly, there's 2 unions.
Yeah.
There's the patrolmen's union, which is basically the people on the street.
Okay.
And then there's the second union, which is for like the sergeants and the salary.
That's
employees.
FOP?
They're
Yeah, the FOP for supervising officers is FOP, patrol officers is CPPA.
so yeah, so we have to do this.
So then,
Cleveland police, the Cleveland patrolmen's, I can't say.
Cleveland Police
Cleveland
Patrol.
patrolmen's, thank you. I could get the.
So question, I don't know if Columbus has these auxiliary, but I also think because of the bias issue, can we also include HOPA,
So
Hispanic officers?
we don't
and-
have any control over that, but this was just saying that there are models with union support, so that arises.
No, I'm just saying like
I
if
don't-
we decide, no, I'm saying if we decide to engage with the unions, can we also include HOPA and Black Shield?
I think I think that's like getting in the weeds a little bit, and it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. I think what's happening right now is that I think Commissioner Rodriguez is presenting sort of the, what she found through her research, so we can consider as we move forward, what model we think may be best for us to move forward. And I think that when we get to that point, I think then that might be the appropriate place to have the conversation.
And then some of
The
it,
Black Shield and the whole thing. all that.
yeah, but
Okay.
some of it is that we will not even have jurisdiction over that, right? Because as I opened, the commission overall may help and implement, but we don't implement the process, if that makes sense.
I don't understand. For promotion?
You wanna say something? She pointed at you.
Oh, you want to say something?
I think it's on.
Okay, thank you for doing this. I do love the models. I've been studying this since 2016 because this is a pillar, an absolute pillar of police reform worldwide. This process has to be done properly. That being said, Lieutenant Justice and I down in Columbus, we were looking at their models back in 2017 as they came forward with their new contracts and so on and so forth, as we worked out contracts here. I also looked at New Orleans. I looked at Newport News, Virginia. I went out to California and looked at LAPD. One of the things I found that's unique here in Cleveland is that the evidence-based process that's there only works or only goes up to captain. Everything above there is solely by appointment. Appointment only, there's nothing to measure anything as to who can be a commander and who can't.
Right.
FOP does not explicitly protect commanders, but only in, I think, 3 of the commander positions will they step in to protect. The other commander positions are outside of the FOP in Cleveland. The other thing is, and I really wanted to stress this, I kind of hope for you guys to look for an actual process, not just for an ad hoc situation for this.
Right.
And I believe that you do have the power, but the power is not explicitly given. It
Right.
says that you have the power to write this. What it does say is that you have the power to write policy.
Right.
So through your policy, you can write an evaluation process that will deal with this. As for the community side of it, the New Orleans model, it builds out the community side in all evaluations so that what you're getting and what the community is saying about these officers, supervisors, as they go up through the ranks. So you know that, so you don't have to have that part of it. You will get that when you look at your performance evaluations. So all these things is what I've been trying to tell you. If you just build it out from the bottom up, you'll have all the information that you need.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, basically, I think we're in agreement. So it's kind of twofold, right? We're actually in the process, because that's just how it happened, right? With 4th District BSS as well as 1st District, right? So we have to do 2-track, right? Now as well as in the future, right? So this is just in the beginning because Jason did recommend, and I agree with it, of exploring other models similar to what you said of what are some different avenues, right? But just in a quick research, so for the last one, and what I really like with this one is that it was across the state level and it was for the fire and police officers, right? For Texas, yeah. And then you can review that. That's a 100-page document. But, I choose to present it, right? And then those, if there's time to implement, we could follow through, right? As well as for the last one, this one I highlighted because in their oral portion with basket exercise, task specific, right? They have 4 assessments, 1 from the department, 2 from an outside agency, and 1 from a civilian, right? Which was interesting. Of course, with training as well as, that could be the commission, that could be community member, if you want to delegate as a liaison, right? And this innovative approach creates an agreement with partnerships surrounding the agency and provides supervisors with an assessment panel at the rank that their promoting agency is testing. The agreement will provide assessors at no cost, and each assessors would train together to understanding the scoring matrix in the assessment portion of the test. And it incorporates outside agency evaluators, and it removes the bias from the process, because they don't know the candidate, basically.
Did you say Uvalde?
Huh?
What city did you stay in Texas?
Okay, so, I thought you
What?
What city did you say?
This is El Paso.
So one of the things that I think we should be mindful of is there are times that things are written into policy and it sounds like a good idea, but making sure they were also aware of how it's being executed and when things fail. So
Yeah, that might be true, but I think it's very important to I think it's interesting and see that when we implement it, if that's a possibility. I didn't say the whole program, I just highlighted this key part, right? And that this may be something to consider of a diverse interview panel, right? Specifically of one from the department, because I'm pretty sure they might be involved and engaged, two from outside, right? Of equal ranking, right? So if you have commander, you have two outside commanders in a partnership, and then civilian, right? That might be something to consider, right? So there's different options, different models, right? And then basically just a summary is the review of qualifications. All who meet the minimum qualifications are invited to take the promotional exam, right? That's that open, fair, and impartiality, right? That we're looking for. The best promotional models approach development of promotional systems with a focus on content validity, which is testing on those components with the actual job descriptions, right? And having those scenarios really focus on the task of the job, essentially. Scoring practices to have evaluators outside of the department or create partnerships with training to ensure that you're assessing the same models, right? And then something else we found was a promotional eligibility list. So basically all the promotional examination results and eligibility list will remain valid for 1 year or until the list is exhausted. And I put exactly where I got it from. And basically, so that's, especially if you're doing commanders, right? That we're not utilizing our resources efficiently, and we're not continuing to do interviews, right? The goal is really of competencies, and so if you have a test, they're meeting the basic metrics for the test, right? Policies, procedures, evidence, whatever you test for, right? Part 2 will really based on the different models, or especially the Columbus model, is based on those key skills that you're looking for, which is kind of highlighted in the consent decree, is those interpersonal skills, the decision-making, communication, and leadership, right? That's just quickly, right? Yeah, and I guess to meet the review of the qualifications to ensure they meet basic, whatever your qualifications are. So Columbus had, let me find it. Columbus had a requirement for a bachelor's degree, 1 year of continuous accredited service as a permanent appointee in the class of police lieutenant. So it's going to be different for us, right? But basically, whatever those leadership components that you want to ensure that those candidates have, that's included into that, right? Prior to the phase or very soon after taking it, right? Possesses a valid driver's license. Something you may want to include is something related to discipline in their history, right? So because we're in the consent decree, there might be some unique qualifications for us, right?
it's very thorough. So good. Thank you.
Andrea,
Jason.
great job for doing that. There's a couple of things that I want to add to that. One is These models were invented by police for police to excel inside policing and help themselves be promoted. And so the main point I want to say is we're in the situation we're in with policing from the idea that police are in this silo, right? They learn from each other, they teach each other, they promote from within, and very limited knowledge comes from outside and infiltrates into the police department. It's a known. That's why I put 116 in front of you, because Richard already mentioned, Adriana mentioned qualifications. We've never had a real qualification standard for what a commander should be here, right? What makes a commander? Our 100 Years Project identified that just because you were a good police officer, driving around in a car, responding to crime, doesn't mean you're going to be a good detective or a good leader or a good police chief or a good anything at a higher level. Those things should have different standards than just if you were a good police officer, right? It's when, especially when you get to this level, it's more about running a business operation than it is about anything to do with policing. You have people who know how to write warrants and make arrests. You don't need to be the best at those things anymore. What you need is to be good at HR, good at integrity, good at managing problems, good at running your district efficiently, right? Those types of things need to be considerations. That's why it's important to remember that you should not just look at how police determine what makes it, but look at private sector. What are they doing? How do they evaluate people? You know, how are they finding good leaders? What makes a good leader in the private sector? Because police leadership classes are usually like 10 or 15 years behind what the private sector is teaching in human resources and personnel. And we just talked about that today, the Byzantine policies that exist at the city. Police are just as bad at not following the latest, greatest science in management and things of that nature. So you can think outside the box when you set those qualifications and you determine, do we have to only promote from within? It's a known that no city has gotten out of their consent decree without bringing in outside leadership. And that may be somebody who's from another police department still, right? But in our charter, it says it doesn't even have to be from a police department. It just has to have law enforcement experience, right? So you have the chance to, and it breaks that loyalty. The biggest problem that we see with promotion from within is you bring with it a lot of baggage and loyalty, right? And that's where the system sometimes gets broken, because the loyalty isn't to the best operation of the police. It's to the patronages and the things you owe from the time coming up, right? So I want you to keep that in mind, that part of the reason we're in the problems we're in when we look at our 100 Years Project and all the research we've done is from the way we've been promoting and how internal is always the way we're doing it. And we're taking a little bit of a backslide right now. The CPC made a recommendation for a safety director to be outside the department years ago. We got our first civilian safety director, but now we're going right back to internal promotions for chief and internal promotions for safety director. Safety director is the previous chief. So there is this methodology to keep that going. So you guys have an opportunity to really look at the problem from a wider perspective and integrate new, fresh ideas, not just follow the existing models. You can take existing what works and marry it with what might be better for the future of Cleveland and policing. So keep that in mind as you move forward to think a little bit outside, you know, just what are other people doing right now in policing.
Public comment?
I guess any further questions, discussions? I think before we do public comment, maybe we should hone in next steps. It seems like finalization of our rubrics, reviewing the finalization of the rubrics, receiving documents. Receiving documents. Anything else we can think of?
I guess to Executive Director Good's point, for moving forward, not with these commander hires, as we're thinking about the process, just doing a little bit more research. And so just coming up with another, and I can work with Brian on that, but just doing more research on what other places are doing outside of just the police world when it comes to promotions and things like that.
Well, we'll see what we receive, And I'll leave that up to the staff. I look forward to learning more and seeing if there's anything that we could recommend. Okay. Yep. So the next steps we have, just finalizing the rubrics, the performance evaluations. One thing I would like to add, I gotta write everything down, is really, I might have missed it. CPD goals, if they have goals, like a strategic vision framework. That's just from my knowledge. And then exploring more promotional models. That sounds good. I guess, oh, yeah.
What I wanted to, just to get some direction from this committee, I know, that I need to respond to an email from Chief Todd about sort of where we are in the promotions process. So I wanted to wait until this committee was actually able to meet before Sharina and I responded. I am gonna follow up and, express that this committee would really, feels that they cannot make the best decision without the use of force records, as well as, the evaluations. But I guess because you all are gonna be the ones that are really gonna be moving this forward, I would just want some direction from you.
Yep, that
In
sounds
terms
good.
of like, how do you wanna, we're not gonna move forward without this, or, I just wanna.
We're not able to,
We're not
because
able to.
we're not able to conduct the, resume, well, I call it resume, but whatever that, if you want to rename it,
We can't, yeah.
that
We want an
rubric,
evaluation.
yeah.
Like we can't do the initial evaluation of things without all the documents that we need.
Mhm.
Preliminary evaluation.
Yeah, and we have a tentative
A
date, right?
preliminary evaluation. And so the goal, the date that Commissioner Early threw out, that May 15th date, is when we would at least hope to have
Our tentative date.
a tentative date so that we can, hold an event and,
Mhm.
and really gauge community. And we're willing to put the work in and we'll speed through and get it done, but we need those records.
So the May 15th date is exactly, because I came in late.
It's a tentative date for working backwards of when we will want to at least have this. So in order for us to have
To have
a
the
public,
meeting?
mhm.
Okay.
So if you had to think of it if we had, I don't know, May 31st, June 1st, we would know. If we were able to do this, then we deliberate, maybe have a couple weeks. That put us at May 31st, like you said, June 1st, June 1 would be, when the person would start or whatever. But we need those documents first so that we can try to even meet in our own internal deadlines so that we can start promoting.
Okay, and then one other thing, is it possible that we can meet every Thursday? I know it's a commitment.
Man, what's the budget for food or coffee? Can we have coffee or snacks or something? I'm just asking.
And possibly from 3:30 to 5:30. And the rationale is because, things are happening with, our staff. And I think it's important that they have work-life balance, right? As well as ourselves.
I'm okay with that. Just be mindful that, sometimes there's other meetings. Like I know today, budgeting grants, we had some meetings earlier.
I checked. So far, it's not. So that's why if we can do this now and finalize it and get it on the calendar, we could claim those dates because they go by hotcakes.
Can we
Right?
still have snacks and coffee?
Sure.
I
I'll bring you some.
I can promise coffee, I can't
If I-
promise that.
I'll bring a
Yeah,
snack.
and we always have coffee, or if I know people drink it, don't do much at night because people don't always ask for
If
coffee.
that'll get you
No,
to the meeting, I'll bring you a snack.
I need coffee.
Okay,
so
we'll
I'll
have,
bring
we'll
you a
have it
snack.
going.
Okay, so now we can have community input. It's your time to shine.
Jason, can we
Well,
get
well,
the
this,
microphone?
well, this committee, I know that you're looking at how you're going to hire, command staff. Could I ask you to also consider how you will gauge their performance if you need to recommend their removal?
I don't know.
Well,
Oh, so
well,
not
well,
that, but, so you're saying for this
Well-
committee, I know we do, the way we passed the motion at the last meeting is for commander and for promotional. So this committee will see promotions, but we did not include in that last motion that we will review dismissal. But if you're suggesting we do that, we can potentially maybe
Well,
do a friendly
I
amendment.
guess what I'm saying is that you build out what, and like to what Jason was saying, that you build out what an actual commander is, as far as what their work should be, what it should look like, and what results you should see from it.
Okay.
So that when they're not meeting these results, and you having the community saying, hey, this person is not up to snuff, do you have anything in place to, because I don't know if you guys realize this, but once you're selected as a commander, there are very few that go back to their civil service rank. They pretty much retire from whatever that rank is, or they go up higher within that rank. So once you make that decision, how do you get rid of a bad commander?
Okay.
I mean, but the charter says specifically of like the promotions and recommendations. So I'm not saying that we can't, but
You can make
we've been
policy,
focused. Yeah, but we've been focused on this.
I think that's probably something we should consider. I think it's like probably like a tiered thing. Like we have to get through this first part, which is District 4 and the Bureau of Special Services, and then District 1. But I think that's why this also like promotions and evaluations, because the other thing that this committee is going to do is also come up with some type of evaluation. I know that we were thinking some internal evaluations, but then to Mr. Jackson's point, we might want to consider how will we evaluate the commanders as well. I mean, I think that could be on the table.
Because to Mr. Jackson's point, I think the thing that we have not thought about is what is a commander? I think in essence, we have never talked about what is the definition of a commander. Like, I think we're just all assuming based off of like the CPD job description and our knowledge.
What the policy,
And with the policy, yes,
what did
But-
you know?
like the GPO, that's fine. But I think that I think community, if I'm understanding Mr. Jackson's comment correctly, is that we have more power and authority than we are actually utilizing. So is that what we as a commission agree with as a commander? Because there's been evidence that the commission prior to us and our iteration of the commission with that 100-year project and others that might have a narrative of what community believes is a commander. And then there's what CPD says is a commander. And I think what we're being pushed right now is to think about, we have more power than we're utilizing. And so in that, have we actually had a discussion or thought about, from a commission standpoint, what do we think a commander is, and an agreed upon principles or job description? And it doesn't mean that it has to be in conflict with what CPD is. It is more of, have we actually just taken the time to reflect and come together and draft something of, this is what we see as a commander, and this is what CPD says, and so how do we marry that both? Because we still make up the community, we get community input. How do we marry that both? I think that, if I'm understanding his comment, we're being pushed to do that.
Sorry, quick comment through the. Is there a chair for this committee yet? I'm sorry.
It's a work group.
Okay, it's a work. I'm
This is the
so.
work group?
I thought it was.
Oh,
It's a
it's
committee.
a committee.
It's
Oh,
a
it is a
committee.
committee. Oh, I
It's a
didn't know that.
committee.
Okay.
Through the non-existent chair. My response to that is, I think accountability and discipline could be possibly involved in those, in the removal of a commander. So there may be a process set in place through that.
You can't remove something that you haven't defined.
And then in terms of your suggestion on defining what a commander is, we also have the ability to modify GPOs.
Yes.
So maybe after that discussion, you could say the next step would be to modify the GPO that defines what a commander is.
Yeah.
So those are just my
That'd
two
be-
thoughts.
yeah.
I see that in collaboration with the policy,
Yeah.
right? So,
But I think that just the initial thing, right?
oh, yeah, so, I think this is a start, right? But I think it will be a continuing conversation. So I think we can, of course, if there's something, you can feel free to bring it. And I think that can start the process, but I'm not sure if it will be like, especially in this process, we're like all cleared out, all defined. I think it's gonna be a work in progress, basically.
I can create a draft of what I would think, based on the conversations we've had over a year, and then send it out to this committee and the policy committee and accountability to see everybody's thought process on that, if that is helpful in the definition of a commander. Okay. I'll do
I
that.
just, what I will add is, 'cause I'm not, to my knowledge, and Jason, you can correct me if I'm stating something that's inaccurate. But I don't think we have a job description for the commanders
We don't.
or what
We
their
don't.
duties and responsibilities are. So
Oh.
what I will do when I
Wait, that's
send
fine.
the email to update, Chief Todd about sort of where this committee is, I'm also gonna request, a job description and what the actual duties in the commander.
There's
I don't
no,
think it is.
So I don't think it exists.
I know, but I wanna make the request. I don't think it
because then
exists,
the
but
chief can tell us.
but we've never asked to my knowledge. So I just wanna know,
There's,
if it doesn't exist, then that's kind of a problem.
Right.
yeah, that's what
So
like,
I'm gonna make the request and then we'll see what we get. But I feel like at this point of the discussion, we're talking about, you know, what exactly is a commander? And I think a place to start would be, what is the job description?
Right,
What are the
and
duties
I think-
responsibilities?
I didn't
We need to
realize
have
we
that
didn't
on
have
paper.
The rationale for providing the research is because there's other models where there is an exact job description. And that helps with the selection as well as when we talk about evaluation and things like that. So it's twofold, right? One is to perform our assessment as well as, here's a model, especially Columbus, that's very close, that highlights our job description and the imperative on really doing those two different, well, conducting the promotional process, right? Of the test as well as those task-based assessments,
I just
right?
want to make sure this is on the record, just make sure we're not misspeaking. As of 2021, there is a GPO that outlines the duties and the definition for CPD for a commander. So we might not have a job description because we haven't requested one, or I don't know I don't know. But I will say, just for the record's purposes, there does exist a GPO that outlines the definition and the duties of a commander for a Cleveland Police Department.
Yes, that is accurate. And according to the research, that there should be a job description that focuses on different requirements that will be outlined, of course, in the GPO to basically assess on those frequently performed tasks as well as task execution and basically ensure that you have the knowledge for that role, right?
Jason, you're gonna say something?
No, I don't, even if there is the GPO, it still is, there's different command positions. Each one of those positions can be further defined. So what is the difference between a commander and Bureau of Special Services? What are their so you can define those, and you can even change qualifications depending on if you're a district commander versus
I think that's in the GPO.
so if it's in the GPO, that's fine, But
It breaks down each
but
one.
what is the qualifications, that comes out in the Form 1, I think, when they put it out, they say these are the minimum criteria you need to meet to apply. But those are open to interpretation too, is that criteria the right criteria? So-
Okay.
And to your point, policy, that's in policy if it's a GPO, so it can be added to, it can be approved upon. And to Mr. Jackson's point, we have seen in the news and other places and heard it from when his iteration of this commission, we went to the unions, they all were unanimously agreed that command behavior is something that needs to be improved. So what we heard from the officers at the unions when we went was that there's no accountability at the command level, and that if you're a commander, you can do whatever you want, to Richard's point, and probably never be held accountable. We've seen some commanders held accountable this year, one in this past year, and others who retired and were accused of very egregious things without any accountability or any investigation. So
Quick question, was any of that recorded?
The
comments that you guys received from Philistines when
no,
Mr. Jackson-
those were in what do we call those, focus groups. So, and it was about the community problem-oriented policing plan. We went out and talked in focus groups to union members. And I would suggest we do that again, is talk to officers too about their impressions of commanders and the commander selection process, and how do they feel about commanders that are selected, and et cetera. The division was gonna do 360-degree evaluations, and that was quashed. They didn't want to have officers rating their superiors. So that was one thing that I know that was discussed years ago, so.
Okay, so, I think this is another, the two, I think, critically important things came up. Oh, I'm Kayla. Two critically important things, I think, came up in this meeting that, and I'll try to be concise here, which I struggle with. Okay, the one is the conversation that you guys were having earlier regarding, what is community input and that sort of thing. The other is the moment that I feel like we're experiencing right now, which is, I've talked to some of you guys about this feeling that I always feel like there's a veil over our eyes, always, and not that any specific people or institutions put it there, but there's this way that it feels like a pattern where we're not starting on the fundamental level of what we're dealing with, and then we get confused because we don't really, these are things that are new to us, you know, new to you guys sitting here around this table. And so they seem at a certain point like they're obvious. And then I think there's an element of it's embarrassing to back and think like, do we have a commander job description? You know, we're having a whole conversation about how we're going to assess these commanders, and there's a fundamental just base thing that we're not able to quite see. And it's because it never feels like we're starting from the ground up, or our feet never feel fully planted on the ground. And that's how it feels to me. I don't know, you know, to what extent others have that experience. This meeting, I just want to give props to Commissioner Rodriguez for this presentation that you put together. I think it was great. And thank you for doing that. You know, and I was at the meeting where this committee was formed. And I can say, like, walking in today, I did not really know what was going to happen today. There's a way that, again, we're not setting the groundwork for stuff, right? So, like, there was no chair pro tem of this meeting. There's no sense of the scope of this committee's work. We don't, you know, and those are just fundamental conversations that I think ought to be had as a structural element at the beginning of things. We often end up in situations where I think, have artificial deadlines that we put on ourselves. And it's been said, it's not the commission's fault that we ended up in a situation where we're now feeling like we have this deadline and it's on us to put, you know, forth these commander positions. But I don't think we fully embody that fact. It is not just not on us, but those roles are interim roles. People are in those positions. There's this sense that there's this urgency, like the city of Cleveland does not have commanders in these roles, and that's not the case. And instead of laying the groundwork for ourselves here, so that we're creating a container that doesn't have holes in the bottom of it, instead we're reacting to something that could have been avoided on other people's ends. And that's how I will say, and it's a pattern that I notice where I wish that when we like come into a meeting that we're, especially like the first meeting of a committee, that we're all starting with the same general information and setting like definitions. What is this? I mean, on the website, this is called the Police Promotions and Evaluations Committee. I don't know what we're calling it today. I think it has a different name somewhere else. But these, oftentimes, I don't want us to be delaying, and I know that sometimes it's looked at as like, we're not getting to the work. Like, we're not getting to the work. But I feel, from what I witness and experience, is that we just keep reacting and reacting and reacting, and we're reacting to this idea that we want people to look at us as doing work. And instead of what I think we should be doing, which is being more proactive about making sure that we block up all those holes in the bottom of our container, because stuff will continue to fall through. So in sum, again, I think this is just an important moment of recognizing that there's some fundamental things that we need to, get up to, everybody needs to kind of get up to speed on, but it's okay to say that we don't know, because we don't know, certain things. We just went back and forth like 3 times as to whether there was actually a job description for commanders. And it's okay, right? So, thank you for listening to that. And I just, it's a pattern. So it's not an isolated thing, and this was a great meeting that I think important things were touched on. So thank you guys. And thank you for not, coming at each other for anything or whatever, so I appreciate it too.
Yeah, that's easy here.
Well, thank you for that.
Wait, we need to vote.
Oh,
You
sure.
want me to chair?
Okay, let's put a motion.
I would like to put a motion forward to make Adriana Rodriguez the chair of the police promotions and evaluations committee.
Give a second.
Yep,
Okay.
have a second?
So it was probably moved and seconded, for me to chair the committee. Any further question or debate at this time?
Let's vote.
If none, let's vote. Commissioner Early? Commissioner Garrett Ferguson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez? Aye. Unanimous.
Ah,
you know, yeah.
Yay. Well, that's done. Our last
I listen.
Yeah, so it was on the agenda, but I wanted to ensure that everybody has the chance to vote. So we do have this meeting time tentative on our calendar.
Every week, think about work groups for this committee, because there's a lot to cover. And there's interest.
Sorry to put you back in.
It's fine. So any further questions, debate, any new business? If none, we can adjourn the meeting at 7:54 PM. Thank you.
All right.
Of course.
Thanks.